lawyers and tailors have a lot in common. A boss forwarded his email to his secretary and asked her to inquire whether it's from his lawyer or tailor. The email reads, "Suit is ready, trial on Monday." Welcome, friends and future colleagues, to a new and reinvented Law Guest. I'm your host for today, Muskan Naran. I'm a second year law student from DY Patil University, and we have with us today a very special guest, Advocate Amit George. Sir has been in this field for 10 plus years, and he's an independent practitioner. He has done his PhD from NLU Delhi and his BA LLB from National Academy of Legal Studies and Research University. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Right. Thanks a lot for having me over, Muskan.
Thank you so much, sir. So, sir, I usually start with the question that why did you decide to choose law?
Right. So yeah, that's a proverbial question. Well, I don't think there was any specific tipping point. Right from childhood, I was interested in, say, debating, etc. And along with that interest in debating and, say, in the subject, in terms of subjects, I preferred, say, English, history, economics, etc. And I absolutely detested mathematics. So I guess, at the core, I was meant to be a lawyer. And then, of course, both my parents are lawyers. So that way, even in terms of the family background and the environment, naturally, there is a push towards the profession. But yeah, so ultimately, when I took the call, I think I was pretty clear that this is something which I wanted to pursue as a career.
Right.
So yeah, nothing very exciting or, like, say, like life changing, which prompted me to come in. It was a very sort of a nerdy or a very boring set of circumstances.
So, how would you say was your experience from being a law student? Like, how were you as a law student straight from first year to the last year?
Right. So, see, at least as a law student, I don't think I was particularly ambitious or even in that sense, particularly hardworking in the traditional sense. Yes, I had decent grades. I used to pay the requisite amount of attention in class, I guess. But I mean, I was not somebody who mooted extensively or published extensively as a law student. I think I sort of enjoyed the atmosphere and the experience more because, at least in terms of my overall way of thinking, approaching issues, etc. I thought that law school for me, at least the LLB phase, the 5 years I spent at Nalsar, they were quite transformative for me. Not only in terms of the general personality, but also in terms of my overall outlook towards life and the career and issues, etc. So I don't particularly think, in that sense of learning in terms of the hardcore law, I don't think I put in any particular efforts while I was in law school, but the overall atmosphere, the engagement with your peers, that I think really elevates your standards. And of course, you do have professors who can really ignite your minds in terms of the way they teach. So all in all, I don't think I did anything special while I was at law school. But when I look back now, from what I was when I entered law school to to how I was when I left after 5 years, there was indeed, I believe, a pretty radical shift in a lot of elements.
Right. So, how would you describe yourself as a student when it comes to studying law?
Well, so see, ultimately, as a law student, particularly when one looks at avenues in which one performs, primarily in law school, you will now, especially with a lot of this, let's say, avenues for publication, etc., having become more democratized, and as compared to how it was earlier. But even in our context, let's say, if you were graduating in the first decade of the 21st century, you would essentially, find three essential elements where a law student would perform. You would essentially have people who did very well at moots, domestic and international.
Yeah.
You, of course, had people who did extremely well in terms of the grades, the CGPA. And then, of course, you also had people even back then who had a good amount of publications under their belt.
Yeah.
So I don't think I excelled or did even, remarkably well in any of these. I had decent grades, and but I think the primary focus of my extracurricular activities was parliamentary debating. Okay. I did a fair bit of debating in my 5 years at Nalsar. And along with that debating, one also got to travel a lot domestically, to different colleges. So that was a great experience. And also in terms of being a law student, I thought there were a few courses which I took during the course of the entire study, which tremendously helped. Like the one which I will always count as something which really opened my eyes, if you could use that slightly romanticized terminology, is this course we did on law and poverty, offered by Professor Amita Dhanda at Nalsar, which I thought was something which really blew my mind in terms of, life in general, and also of course in terms of the law and how to approach it.
Right.
So yeah, so it was not very eventful, not a very eventful time, but yeah, a time which I deeply cherish and look back upon fondly.
Right. So, having parents as lawyers, do you think that you had a very good interaction with law in general, like when you were starting out, or when you were a law student, or before that, you had a good interaction with law? You had an environment that you can talk about, about your career and everything, or you thought that maybe, like, that doubt that comes in you that maybe I'm not made for this field or something like. Did that ever creep in, or just?
Right. So, see, frankly speaking, at least in the family atmosphere, I really don't think my parents ever pushed me towards a particular field, in terms of, let's say, deliberately having conversations centered around the law or anything of that sort.
Mhm.
So, at least in terms of my choice, of course, that inherent comfort which one feels in terms of having somebody in the family who's already, let's say, gone through that particular process, that obviously at the subconsciously, I'm sure, definitely helps. But
Mhm.
as I mentioned to you, my interest or my decision to go in for law was based more on what my intimate or my personal understanding of what
Mhm.
my interests would be. That was essentially the guiding factor.
Mhm.
But ultimately, when I did get into the law, see, one thing is naturally with, especially with law schools today, there is a lot of competition, and which is good also, because your peers are very, very intelligent people, and they're very articulate, hardworking. And so therefore, at some point in time, at least in the initial year or two,
Mhm.
when I still had to get used to that atmosphere,
Mhm.
there was obviously some small amount of an existential crisis, at least in the first year.
Right.
Because they were so, because all of us, especially when we enter institutions, all of us take our own time to be able to, let's say, gel with that particular place,
Right.
on a lot of parameters.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just staying away from family for the first time, or the rigor of the curriculum, or
Right.
generally getting used to this new, let's say, bunch of people you've just been forced to live together with. So
Right.
all of us take our own sweet time to adjust, and let's say find our own place in any such institution. So on that parameter, yes, the first year was a bit of a struggle. And there were times when one thought, what are we doing here? But at least by the second year, I think that sort of cloud, even though it wasn't very extensive,
Mhm.
even to the extent it was there, I think it largely lifted. So after first year, I think it was, at least in terms of not having an existential crisis, I think things were smooth.
Right. So, why did you decide to choose litigation? Why didn't you decide like other fields? Did you explore them well enough, or did you think that your calling was this one?
Well, see, I think so. At least in terms of litigation, I think my choice was also based on some very myopic considerations, because especially since I love debating. So
Okay.
my thought was, oh, oh, excellent. You'll stand up in court and have this,
Right.
brilliant 15-minute, 20-minute speech, and the judge will be floored and everybody will clap for you, and especially when you see all of the, Boston Legal and all of these
Right. Right.
American sourced,
Suits.
TV shows which deal with the law, or even movies,
Mhm.
there is that romanticized, let's say, oral argument heavy understanding
Right.
of how
Right.
litigation is. So
Mhm.
that obviously propelled the choice to a large extent. But also beyond that, I undertook a lot of litigation internships during
Okay.
my time at law school. I,
Mhm.
in fact, did only one corporate law internship, and which I absolutely hated. I spent about a month with a corporate law firm, and I detested the experience. So, not that I, let's say, interned under an environment, where I was, say, let's say, exposed to the academia, or whether it's not like I did an internship, say, with a research organization, so that I could actually sample what was there. But largely, the thought of litigation really attracted me, and I was, at least that is something which I aspired for, in terms of something which really thrilled me,
Mhm.
going beyond just something which I wanted to make a career in and make money out of. And that thrill, survives still today. So therefore, yeah,
Right.
no second thoughts there.
So, what was in the corporate internship that you didn't like, and what is it in the civil or the litigation field that you liked about in your internships?
Right. So again, see, this is purely a matter of personal preference and
Right.
aptitude. It's entirely subjective. But
Mhm.
for instance, when I did the corporate law internship, I was essentially marked to a particular department within the law firm that primarily dealt with, let's say, the element of media law. Now, the particular kind of work which I was getting was that I was expected to look at, say, agreements between, say, a production company which wanted to shoot in a particular country, and the compliances which that particular company required. So I was doing the internship with a London firm. So, you need to check what were the requirements for parties to come do shootings in, let's say, London, film their productions. So a lot of it was work which I didn't really find exciting, because you have to do due diligence. Now, if they want to shoot in a park, what are the local municipal permits they need to take care of? If there are some pigeons there, you have to get an undertaking saying you won't touch the pigeons or something. And ultimately then, of course, you have to do the due diligence in terms of getting their other permits. So it's not as if it's work which is bad in an objective sense, but it just didn't excite me. And the thought of doing that, like nonstop, that really just put me off. So, and again, like I said, ultimately, even if it was intellectually satisfying work, that work would never really result in me ever ending up in court and arguing a brief. So ultimately, irrespective of whether it would have been intellectually stimulating or not, the fact that the end result didn't promise a day in court, that sort of was a deal breaker for me.
Right.
So this is primarily why I decided to get into law.
Right. So, what is the thrilling about the litigation part that you like to do? As in, you've spent 10 years in this field. So, what do you find is very thrilling for you that makes you wake up every single day?
Well, so I think the most thrilling part has always, I mean, though it was initially based around like this slightly, let's say, fantastical notion of what it means to actually argue in court. But even today, I think the part that I enjoy most is that that verbal engagement with the judge, because it is not just thrilling in the sense of the fact that you are supposedly on stage and saying your lines, because initially, at least, that's what thrills you most, that you're like a modern day Cicero or something, and you are whatever, spouting these golden words. But more than that, it is actually when the judge engages with you, and the harder your case is, the more difficult the queries which come. Then if you are able to convince the other side, as in the judge, in terms of what you are saying is correct, then that feeling is unmatchable. The thought of convincing another human being who is engaging with you at an intellectual level, and at a level where what you're discussing is the law, and not some random stuff where there'll be a far greater element of subjectivity. And going beyond the law, of course, every human being is different. So in the same way, every judge is different. So the kind of strategy which you follow, how you respond to a judge, how you take care of his or her insecurities in terms of the weakness of your case, and convince them that no, you have a good case. So that is an extremely mentally and even let's say psychologically satisfying exercise.
Right.
So which is what thrills me the most. And aside from that, of course, I also, since I do a lot of trial work, I also really enjoy cross examinations, because there again, you have a witness, and you need to essentially engage in a process whereby at the end of the day, you are able to get something out of the witness which is contrary to his or her own case. So that is also a very, very satisfying thing. It's like a game of chess, and you obviously you need to keep modulating your response. It's a very instinctive sort of like a process. You obviously need to prepare for it, but you can't prepare for it beyond a point. So, the uncertainties in it and all of that of course is part of the charm. So yes, so that is definitely my, the part of the entire process which really thrills me.
Right. It looks like you like engaging with a lot of people. Like you like engaging with people, and you like seeing how people work, and how you observe people and everything. So, do you also enjoy the theatrics in court that happens?
Yeah, definitely. So I am not somebody who's who's great at socializing or anything of that sort. I mean, I am that way a reserved person comparatively. Of course, I have my friend circle, and that is good, but I'm not somebody who's particularly outgoing. But again, the fact of the matter is, that when you are in court, or when you are, say, in a place like that, then naturally a large part of that entire experience is the theatrics.
Right.
And so not just in terms of you being a part of it, but also, as you are aware, when you wait in court, let's say if your matter comes very late in the day, then you have effectively hours and hours of, let's say, watching a play going on in front of you.
Right.
The actors will shift, but one of them, the judge, will always remain the same. So that also is extremely fascinating, because from every person, I mean, obviously all of us will have a likes and dislikes. There are persons we'll respect, there are persons or individuals we will not respect, or maybe not have a high opinion of. That's, again, it's entirely subjective. But from each person, the response to a judge, the mode of argument, the mannerisms in court, the way in the way in which one puts points across, from each person there is something to learn. because all of us evidently have different skill sets. We've
Right.
been blessed with different skill sets, and we are able to develop certain skills much better than others. So
Right.
therefore, it's always good to see, different people, different kinds of people responding to different situations, and that I've always found very, very fascinating.
Right. So, whenever you have done internships, what did you look into these internships? Like, what did you want to gain from the internships that you were doing?
Right. So this is something which even I tell persons who intern with me now, that see, at least for me, the internships were all about uh, getting to know the atmosphere of that particular place where I interned.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of litigation internships, I interned in the trial courts in Delhi. I interned in the High Court. I interned in the Supreme Court. I interned with a firm which pretty much did work in each of these jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, at the end of all of these internships, see, internships effectively are 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Now,
Right.
as you are aware, in the lifetime of a litigation, that is nothing. It's like a drop in the ocean. So in a 4 week or a 6 week internship, the notion that you will be like a master in procedural law or be a master in terms of how things work out in court, that is a very utopian sort of an ideal. So from my perspective, at least, I think the biggest benefit which I got, excuse me, from these internships was that at least I was very clear at the end of all of them that I was most comfortable, say, practicing in the High Court.
Oh.
So at the end of it, that clarity was very useful, because then I was very clear or very sure that the Delhi High Court is where I wanted to start my practice and whatever, continue to be there. So at least from the internship perspective, my advice will be an internship is a very good way of sampling different atmospheres or different ecosystems within litigation practice,
Mm-hmm.
because you will have a very, very large diversity even within the ecosystem of litigation. So
Right.
that way, at least for me, internships were a way of determining or checking out what was good or what I wanted to do in the future, as also opposed to removing options which did not work out for me at all. Because to give you an example, the Supreme Court, when I went to the Supreme Court, for some reason, again purely subjectively, that was not an atmosphere which I found very welcoming in
Okay.
terms of whether I wanted to be there or not. So the
Mhm.
High Court was the place where I was the happiest.
Okay. So, so people say that litigation in itself is a field in which you, after you would run your LLB, you can just go
Hmm.
straight into it and you start working hard for it. So,
Right.
with you, you would have done you have a lot of qualifications. So, do you think that it has helped you in some way in getting ahead in the field in litigation?
See, frankly speaking, what I would say is that in litigation, ultimately, it is your core merit as a lawyer in court which matters.
Mm-hmm.
No amount of additional qualification, any degree whatsoever, really helps in the strict sense of giving you a push.
Mm-hmm.
So for persons who believe that you've done your LLM or you've done your PhD, and then when you enter courtroom, they will be like the special halo around your head, or judges will get up and salute you and all. That is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, but from the other perspective, in the sense that if you want to learn more about a field of law, because LLB, as we all know, is general in nature. So if
Right.
you want to specialize in a particular area of law,
Mm-hmm.
or if you want to engage in, say, sustained research, develop let's say a new field in terms of doing that, etc. So that is something which is obviously a very good option for you, because then it helps at an earlier age or at a younger age, provided your practice is also going reasonably well, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to develop some sort of a name in terms of a specialization in the field.
Right.
So there are people, let's say, who go for, let's say, an IPR focused LLM,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then they practiced on that level. So therefore, that LLM to that extent helps them reach that specialization possibly at an earlier date. So it
Right.
probably feeds the potential of being able to, say, get ahead in a particular area of the law at a
Mm-hmm.
faster rate. So to that extent, it can help, but that is only a potential help. It's not a guaranteed help. And
Right.
secondly, in terms of any course, ultimately, whenever you go into, say, a university, your network, grows. So if you've
Mm-hmm.
done an LLM, then, you may have a wider network in terms of your peers.
Mm-hmm.
So that way also, obviously, in a more latent level, it might help. And then see, ultimately, we live, in our country, degrees still matter a lot.
Right.
So even though I personally don't think it helps, but at least if you have an old school perspective, if you see somebody, oh, he has an LLM, oh, he has a PhD, then naturally the feeling is, oh, this man must be, or this woman
Right.
must be somebody really brilliant. But on the ground level, it doesn't work like that, because you still have to prove yourself in court on a daily basis. But again, like I said, I mean, nobody's complaining if somebody has that outlook and you have the degree, to be able to make use of that outlook. So yeah. So therefore, if you ask me practically, from my perspective, in terms of concrete terms, I really don't think there is any benefit to an extra degree as such. But as an individual, for your own holistic development, and for let's say accentuating your interest in a particular subject area and specializing there, definitely an additional degree never hurts, because the knowledge never hurts. The pursuit of knowledge, not knowledge, pursuit of knowledge, I don't think ever hurts.
Right. So why did you decide to do your LLM, and in which field did you do it in?
So I did my LLM with a specialization in international dispute resolution, because I had sort of, at least had a blueprint in mind that I would like to, at least to a certain extent, get involved with arbitration in the initial years of my practice. So therefore, when I chose the elective subjects for the course, I primarily focused on subjects which had to do with arbitration. So international arbitration, theory, practice. Then I also took some electives in terms of international dispute resolution, in terms of multilateral organizations like the UN, etc. So therefore, the ultimate focus was to try and understand, at least on a theoretical level, at in a better way, as to how dispute resolution functioned in an international context. So, which is why I chose that specialization. So that was the game plan in terms of choosing the subjects. But then I also had the theory, jurisprudence, etc., mixed with it, so that it was a mix and match and not just one particular stream.
Okay. So how was your experience of a PhD? Like, at what point did you decide that you wanted to do a PhD?
Well, so after my LLM, I think one reason why I decided to do a PhD immediately was, because a PhD also it requires a lot of sustained research work. So unlike in an LLM, at least you have examinations, right? So therefore, there is that fear, if you may call it, or that deadline. So you will naturally, keep studying for it, and then you will write it. But in a PhD, one significant difficulty is, once you actually get through the entrance or you get enrolled, effectively that motivation is something you need to generate intrinsically, because there is no real exam. Once you enroll, 2 or 3 years later, you need to submit a thesis, which is obviously a very steep undertaking, and you need to sustain interest in the meantime. So I sort of realized that by the time I had finished my LLM, I was just 2 or 3 years into the profession. So at that stage, naturally, there was not so much independent work. So, things were still okay in terms of being able to devote that sort of time to a PhD. Right. So I obviously wanted to do it. I was very interested in doing it. So then I thought to myself that ultimately, maybe after 4 or 5 years of practice, when the independent amount of work really increases, or at least increases, hopefully increases. I mean, that's only a hope. That at that stage, it will become maybe too difficult to try and branch out, because the kind of time commitment which a PhD takes is obviously pretty high. So and that was actually came true, because towards the end of the PhD, when I had to submit my thesis, the work increased. And towards the last 5-6 months, it was really a nightmare in terms of being able to juggle commitments in court and before arbitration tribunals, as also working on the PhD thesis. So essentially, it was more of a logistical decision in terms of taking up the PhD almost immediately after the LLM, because I didn't think that in the long run, I would have the motivation to be able to pursue a PhD.
Okay. Okay, so it was merely a strategic decision that you did.
Yeah, so therefore, I knew I wanted to do it, but then I also realized that if I don't do it, may say in the next 2 or 3 years, then I really don't, I don't know for sure if 5 years down the line, I will be able to devote that sort of time which is required, to be able to undertake it. So definitely I wanted to do it. I wanted to engage in that sort of sustained research exercise. And of course, I mean, nobody dislikes that word doctor in front of your name. So of course, that is obviously one of the big factors. Yeah.
Right. So as people say, that litigation is a field which is very scary. It can have a lot of ups and downs that happen. Once there is a lot of work that is happening, it's piling on, and once there is no work. So do you feel that in any way that you have reached a point which was like a high point of your life and then a low point in your career till now?
Right. So I think at least with litigation, I think one thing is that unless I guess you are in your early 40s, one can't even start looking back at one's career, even start looking back at it.
Mm.
So I am far too, let's say, young to, have some sort of a retrospective in terms of how the career has gone. But the only thing I will say is that having looked back, there has been a lot that I have to be grateful for, in the sense that the profession's been extremely kind. And fortunately, after all this time, there is no existential crisis, in terms of the
Right.
profession, which by itself is a blessing.
Right.
And so I think, at least in terms of a high point or a low point, I really can't, visualize any particular high point as such, because I really don't think I've achieved anything of that sort. But the high points which I can say are primarily, the support which you get from your seniors in the profession. And it sounds very, let's say, shady when people say, oh, seniors will support you. And not shady, but it sounds very stereotypical. Everybody says that seniors will support you, but interestingly, when you come into the profession, you will meet a lot of interesting individuals, and who will go out of their way to promote you. And not because there is anything, they have any sort of a vested interest, but you develop these linkages with persons purely dehost possibly your professional sort of let's say engagement. So at least in sort of that encouragement, and a lot of judges, they're much elder to you, of course. And when you first enter a courtroom, you're terror struck. But, at least when you're a young lawyer, when you're finding your feet in the profession, you will find that there are a lot of judges who will go out of their way to actually help you find your feet in terms of, being nicer to you, assisting you, actually assisting you in terms of how to put forth the case, etc. So, of course, it's a very, very competitive profession. And that's something you always hear of. It's very, very competitive, and to a lot of people it's a dog eat dog world. But interestingly, there is so much kindness which still goes around in the profession despite all of its problems. I am not saying it's hunky dory. We have a lot of problems and issues which we want to deal with, but there is a lot of goodness and a lot of kindness that still goes around in the profession. So that obviously is something which is, a very, very pleasant surprise at the end of 10 years, and that gives you hope for the future. Because especially in the last, let's say 5 to 10 years, things have not been so great in terms of, say, one's understanding of, a lot of things. There is some sort of a gloom in terms of how the judiciary functions. And there are a lot of doubts, which obviously I would never have had when I first entered the profession. But despite all of that, ultimately, even for somebody who's not, say, known to game the system, or, a normal lawyer, even as a simple normal lawyer, there is a lot still to look forward to and to be happy about. So that, I think, is the one good thing, because you see so many people who are otherwise disgruntled with the system, or, unhappy fundamentally with the way things are structured. So I'm not whitewashing any of the problems of the profession, but ultimately, I think it's a big blessing to be at the end of 10 or 11 years, be still so optimistic about how the profession is. So that, I think, is what I'm most happy about more than anything else.
So, sir, when would you say in your life or in your career you would say that you made it? Like everybody has that point that you think that you will make it, or that if you reach this, you have made it. So, what is that point for you?
Well, I don't think there is any particular point like that. See, because ambition is effectively endless. Ambition is something which one can't really the thing. So, and a lot of people say, and I agree with that, that, ambition can also be a curse, because, it feeds this constant insecurity in terms of what, you want to do next. So I don't really see any sort of a path forward where I say, oh, if I reach this, then, I am done for, because this is a profession where unless, you drop dead or you retire, you go at it till you're in your 70s and 80s. And the best example is, when Mr. Ram Jethmalani decided to retire for the very first time, there was an autobiography which was written about him. Now, by the time the book came out, he went back into practice. And in those next 10 years, the kind of, again, the kind of cases he handled, the kind of things he reckoned with. So by the time, again, when he was close to his second retirement, another book had to be brought out just to deal with those 10 years.
Wow.
So in this profession, I don't think there is any sort of a concrete basis where one can say, oh, this is like the ideal aim or object. I think one just takes it one day at a time, and as long as one is happy and content, I think that's what matters.
Right. And what about your life? If there is anything that you say that if I can achieve this in my life, then I'll be happy and I've made it.
Right. So, see, at least purely in terms of personal satisfaction, I am somebody who I really like traveling. So, so at least from a very, very materialistic point of view, naturally what I would want is that, I reach that level where, let's say, if I want to once a month, I can just charter a private plane and just fly anywhere in the world and then, just have like this exotic vacation and come back. So, it sounds very flippant, but from a very, very, let's say, personal perspective, that is, the ultimate dream in terms of what one can achieve. But on a more serious level also, I hope to be at someday at a stage financially where one is also able to contribute far more, say in terms of aid, in terms of resources for law students who are unable to access those kind of resources, etc. So ultimately every aim, financial or otherwise, must also take into account one's outlook towards society. So hopefully that also is something which I will be able to, let's say, contribute more to beyond what I already do in the years to come. So these are, purely personal, subjective sort of dreams.
Right.
And of course, a couple of fancy cars won't hurt. But yeah, that's it.
So you have mentioned that a lot of your seniors helped you in growing in your career and improving yourself. So are there any other things that you did specifically that you practiced or you have been doing that has helped you improve in your field or your practice that you're doing?
So, see, I don't think I did anything like out of the ordinary, but from a very early stage in the career. So, I started my career as a judicial clerk to a judge in the High Court of Delhi, and who was a very hard taskmaster, a brilliant judge. And he obviously, made me work a lot. So, that was a very good sort of, let's say, a wake up call.
You did
Because
that in your
again,
first
like
year?
I said, yeah, Muskan, I'm sorry, I
You
didn't hear
did
you.
that in your first year, sir?
Yeah. So immediately after I graduated, I undertook a clerkship for a year at the Delhi High Court, and only then did I start active practice.
Okay.
So, so the judge was a hard taskmaster. He was a very hardworking person, very intelligent.
Wow.
So obviously keeping up with him in terms of, say, his dedication to the field, it was very difficult. So it was quite a step up from me, because considering law school was relatively relaxed. So that was, but most importantly, he also made me get into this habit of being very up to date with precedent, because he was someone very particular about research and about being up to date with the law as it was evolving. So that is a habit which I continued even after I left the clerkship. So I would spend a lot of time every day reading up case law, particularly the recent case law. So initially it was really boring, it was tiresome, but ultimately after 3-4 years, that really helps, because subconsciously, this repository of, let's say, recent case law does sort of percolate into your head.
Right.
And then, it really helps in terms of, let's say, appearing in court or giving advice, etc. And beyond that, after, let's say, the initial few years, I also started writing on legal issues.
Okay.
I started publishing my views on different contemporary legal topics. So that helped, because, it helps you engage in a dialogue at a much wider level than with your limited peer circle. And then naturally, people engage with you at a wider level, and that obviously helps in the profession. And so that is also something which I did on the side. I started writing more in terms of legal topics, etc. So beyond that, I don't think I did anything like particular. I'm terrible at networking. I'm not somebody who's particularly social. So I don't think I was equipped at all. Not that I, didn't want to, but I don't think I was equipped to do any of that. So, which is again part of why, I have faith in the system as such, because despite those handicaps, and not having done anything very revolutionary, things have, by God's grace, worked out.
Right. So you've actually developed a good presence online in terms of being active on LinkedIn, commenting on people's posts, and just being generally engaging with people. So is it important for you as a person being on social media and engaging with people, or is it like something that you do to grow in your field?
See, I think it's primarily something I more do as something in my free time, because it, I think, was a natural corollary of having starting writing on these issues. Because once I started writing, people started reaching out, etc., etc. So then, gradually I moved to LinkedIn, shared the articles I wrote on LinkedIn. It's more of a professional sort of like an ecosystem as compared to other social media networks. And then obviously, then people engage with you, they share their posts, they'll message you directly on some query, etc., etc. So I think it's more on those lines, because frankly speaking, I have never ever converted any sort of a LinkedIn presence into an actual brief or an actual matter.
Okay.
I am told that there are people who have been very successful at that, making professional engagements. But frankly speaking, till date, I don't think I have converted a single let's say, professional engagement from LinkedIn. So
Right.
primarily it's more something I do, let's say in my free time,
Hmm.
and not something which is oriented towards say professional growth per se.
Right. So you've been a part of a lot of webinars during the lockdown. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so like what compelled you to start doing webinars and showing yourself more online?
Well, see, ultimately, I think the webinar was only a manifestation of what otherwise people would have done, say, in the physical setting.
Hmm.
Because pre-lockdown, I used to regularly travel and give guest lectures at different institutions, primarily to do with topics surrounding litigation and
Hmm.
arbitration. So now, once a lockdown happens, naturally, that is out of the question. So
Hmm.
then those avenues then naturally shifted online. So I had universities or let's say other organizations who I would otherwise have engaged with reaching out to me in terms of doing these things online.
Okay.
And then also because the webinar space exploded, a lot of,
Right.
let's say entities which were otherwise not, let's say, looking forward to a, let's say interaction like this, then,
Right.
that also started out. So
Hmm.
it was more of an organic sort of like a process. I had a lot of my peers who were organizing webinars. They would call me up, either as a moderator or say an introductory speaker. In some
Hmm.
instances, you were the main speaker. So, I think it was the sign of the times, and, that was the general trend at that point in time. So yeah, it just worked out accordingly. So
Right.
the only difference was that earlier I was, let's say, more involved, say, in terms of the text, in terms of writing. But now,
Hmm.
because, the demand of the time is more in terms of webinars, so then, yeah, you have more of a webinar presence. So yeah,
Right.
that was it.
So you talked a lot about how the system needs a lot of change. So what are some of the things that you don't necessarily like about the system or something that bothers you? Because you've been here for a long time and you are going to be here for
Right,
a long
right,
time. So what are the things
right.
that you would want to change on your level or you want the system as a whole to change? And so some things that you would like to discuss.
Right. So, see, ultimately, I think what really, at least for me, the fact or the negative element of litigation, which at least personally really saps me, is
Hmm.
the wastage of man hours. So, because
Right.
to give you an example, if you have, say, two matters in court,
Hmm.
and so the day before you spend hours and hours preparing for them, and the next day you land up in court, and let's say for both these matters, in one of them there's an adjournment, the other one at 4 o'clock, the judge says he or she does not have any more time, and
Hmm.
the matter actually gets adjourned to another day.
Hmm.
So this is something extremely frustrating because just see the amount of hours you wasted. You
Hmm.
wasted possibly 3-4 hours on the day prior preparing for the case,
Hmm.
and you wasted effectively 10:30 to 4:30 in the court that day.
Right.
So that's approximately 10 hours of productive time, which is
Hmm.
completely obliterated. And
Hmm.
this is not really anybody's fault. It's more of a systemic defect, because
Hmm.
you can't blame the judge for not listening to your matter if he or she has 50, 60 matters in a board on a day,
Right.
right? So that is not humanly possible. So there's no
Hmm.
point criticizing judges beyond a point, because ultimately they are really struggling in terms of the docket explosion which has been witnessed in our court system.
Hmm.
So therefore, I think one of the biggest issues which we need to tackle is in terms of how we structure our let's say arrangements in terms of how we actually slot matters for a daily hearing. So
Right.
in a VC that is easier, but a
Hmm.
VC is not a optimum sort of a situation, because now we are not listing the number of matters which we used to list.
Right.
So at a very personal level, I think my greatest problem with the litigation scene as of today is this, that you spend so much time preparing, and all of that time you could have used productively. If you knew for a fact your matter is not coming 10 to 4, there is so much else you could have done, so
Hmm.
much else.
Right.
But that time is gone, and ultimately, even if you bring your laptop to court and all that, once you are in court, like I said, the theatrics take
Right.
over. So unless it's a very, very pressing deadline, it's very difficult for you to open up your laptop and sit and work in court
Right.
or write outside court.
Hmm.
So that for me personally is the most frustrating part of it, because that really obliterates your work life balance also. Now 10
Right.
to 4, the matter doesn't come, and you come back home, or you come back to the office at 5, then you start preparing for the next day.
Hmm.
Otherwise the next day's preparation would have happened between 10 to 4, right?
Right.
And that would have made your life normal. That's one
Hmm.
of the biggest problems of litigation. The
Right.
work life balance, the lack of the work life balance, is not just the workload, it's also the amount of time you waste because the system is inefficient. And
Right.
that inefficiency is also primarily because of the fact that we are under resourced, and we have far too many cases and far too few judges.
Right. So do you yourself feel that you have trouble maintaining like a work-life balance?
Yeah, I that is something which I really struggle with. I really struggle with that, and it is not at all a healthy balance at the moment. But like I said, ultimately these are things which you can't control beyond a point, and not that it makes it any better. But if you all ask any lawyer in the profession, this is something which I think everybody struggles with. Some of them have found, some ways of maybe making their peace with some sort of an adjustment,
Right.
but I have yet to hit that sort of like a golden threshold.
Right.
So yeah, that's not
So,
happened so far.
what are some of the things that you do outside of work? Like some things just to like chill out, just to have a little bit of fun.
Well, yeah. So unfortunately, earlier I had a very wide general reading habit, but in the last approximately 7 to 8 years, because of possibly too much focus on the law,
Right.
that is something which I have lost and which I really regret having lost.
Mhm.
But aside from that, I think my primary stress buster is about spending time with my kids,
Mhm.
and then of course traveling, like I said. No, so that is something I really look forward to.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, especially now with
COVID
the
has been a
attendant
bummer.
weight gain. No, and no, unfortunately, I'm a foodie. So
Okay.
food is something I love. I love visiting, restaurants, trying out new fare. But yeah, with the slowing metabolism over the years, that has turned into more of a curse than anything else. So
Right.
yeah, so primarily these are the stress busters which I enjoy. I like going for longish drives, etc.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Right. So we are almost approaching the end of the show, sir. So what does your day look like?
Well, so I think right now is not a good time to ask that question because now it's extremely fragmented, in terms of how the evolving situation is. But
Right.
yeah, in a typical day when you were like going to court full time, I guess a typical day would be. So I'm not exactly a very early riser. I'm more of a night bird. So I would say have a start say at around 8 in the morning, 7:38 in the morning,
Mhm.
and then push off to court by about approximately 9:45.
Mhm.
Then depending on how things would pan out in court, either come back around lunch or at around 4:30. Sometimes you may have arbitrations, so you will go for the arbitrations.
Mhm.
Sometimes you may have evening arbitrations, which means after 4:30 in court you go for a 5 p.m. arbitration, and you're back at around 7.
Okay.
So that's pretty brutal. And then
Right.
whenever you get back, then depending on the workload for the next day, either I'll go home, take a small break, because I have my office in the same building where I have my residence. So
Okay.
therefore, it's easier. That to that extent, commuting is reduced. So I'll
Mhm.
go up home for some time, then maybe come back. But if it's a really bad day, then you continue straight till late at night, as and when the work is completed. And so yeah, not exactly a very cheerful, sort of like a situation. There's no real 10 to 5 or 10 to 6 sort of like a
Right.
system.
Right. Sounds hectic, sir. So,
Yeah.
so the last question is going to be how, what can we see you doing in the future?
Well, so I think pretty much what I am doing now, but hopefully, let's say with more of an understanding of why I am doing it, and obviously, see, for a lawyer, ultimately that's the end game. No, you do more briefs, you
Mhm.
engage with more difficulties, with more problems, you learn more about the law, the other fields beyond what might be your area of focus at the present. So
Right.
primarily, that's what I hope to do in the future. Evolve into wider areas of law, deal with let's say areas of law which I have not dealt with so far. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm not somebody who has long-term goals. At best, I'll have short-term goals. So right now, the short-term goal is getting through this somehow
Right.
and getting back to the normal courts as and when we manage to overcome this. So
Right.
that's the short-term goal.
So thank you so much, sir. It was great having you on the show. It was so exciting talking to you and knowing you better, like off LinkedIn. Thank you so much for coming, sir.
Right, right. No, thank you, Muskan. Thank you for taking out the time, and thank you for having me over. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So
Right.
everybody,
Bye.
please subscribe to the channel and please check the description for sir's LinkedIn account. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Muskan. Bye bye.